شلام عليكم. أنا ريبيكا سايمون. مجيبة يوداء شاميران قابلوخي ممشينا. أرخن أمان أديو إلى ميغورتا كاريسا بويد. قد إلى خانق وأمريكيتا قد جانو أجورو شقيلنا وجروسنا خيال سورة آتورايا. كاريسا عدية منمدوية من أغدانة ميشيغان أمريكا. Charissa, hello, and
Hello.
welcome to Shamiram Media. It's a pleasure
so
to
much.
have you tonight.
I'm glad to be here.
Charissa, you have adopted a little Assyrian boy. What is his
Yes.
name?
His name is Victor.
Do you have children of your own?
We did not have any children before Victor. He's our first.
And is Victor the only little boy or little child that you attempted to adopt?
He is the first one we were officially matched with. It was a long process for us, but he was the one that we finally were matched with, yes.
How difficult is it, or how easy is it, to adopt a child in the United States?
Well, I would say maybe not as easy as giving birth in some ways. In other ways, it's just different. For us, it took about a year and a half to receive our placement from when we first started the adoption process. We expected it and hoped for it to go more quickly, but that was our experience.
I guess you have to get lucky. Right person, right time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how it works. Did you have to go through an agency, or how was the adoption made?
Right. So there are actually a few different options when it comes to adoption. You could do a private adoption where you just personally meet with an expectant mother and a lawyer and you work it out. For us, we chose to use an agency just because we wanted some very trustworthy resources in the process, people to guide us through, people who had experience with adoption. And we knew that it was a bit less risky to have a failed adoption if we were working with an agency. Yeah.
Does the adoption agencies do the adoption agencies examine the child for health issues, genealogical issues? So when you get a child, you kind of know the issues that they have?
Really, truly, because most issues with a child develop and become easier to spot over time. There's really not a way an agency can do a whole lot of that ahead of time. Most agencies, you will interview the birth mother and the birth father, definitely, to get kind of a medical history, a history of the pregnancy, what the child might have been exposed to during that time. But really, just as when you birth your own child, you never really know what to expect.
Did you want a little girl or a little boy, or it didn't matter to you guys?
You know, for us, it really didn't matter. I kind of went back and forth. Sometimes I would dream of having a little girl, other times a little boy. So by the time the adoption came, by the time it took place, I was kind of just happy either way. Yeah.
Did you want a newborn or a little older child, or did it matter to you?
For us, we really did want to have a newborn. So we chose to do it's called a domestic infant adoption. Rather than an adoption of an older child. We wanted to experience the whole babyhood and the early days and months, and we didn't want to miss out on that. So for us, we did choose to do an infant adoption, but older child adoptions are um, possible, and they're very needed. Actually, we have in our country a lot of older children who need families.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of adopting parents now go outside of the United States. There
Hmm.
was a time when parents adopted from Russia. I think that's stopped now or limited.
Right.
Chinese children and children from other countries. Did you
Yeah,
ever think about doing that?
we did definitely because we have both lived abroad previously. We traveled a lot. We have friends from all over the world, and we had originally thought about international adoption for quite some time, but the cost of international adoption is quite a bit more expensive than domestic adoption. And so for us, it didn't make sense to put that much money into it.
But are international children more readily available than domestic American children?
It's actually getting quite a bit more difficult to adopt internationally as the years have gone by, especially the last several years. More laws are being put in place for the safety of children, quite honestly. Um, there is a danger of human trafficking that is quite intimidating when it comes to international adoption. It's still a needed thing. Children need homes no matter where they're from. But there are growing concerns about some international adoptions.
Are these laws put in place by foreign nations or by the United States of America?
In some cases, it is the foreign nations. They've seen things that have happened to children from their countries who have been adopted into the U.S. Um, Not the best stories. And so when they hear those stories coming back, it does cause concern.
Understandably so.
Yeah.
Now, Carissa, did you know anything about a sect of people called the Assyrians before you
Yes.
adopted Victor?
You know, it was about 4 years before we adopted. I was working as a social worker at the time with unaccompanied refugee minors. Those are youth and children who are coming to the United States from other countries, and they're coming alone. They don't have parents or adult relatives to care for them. And so they are placed here in the United States within foster homes. So, this actually, my job there was my first introduction to Assyrians. I was surprised to learn when I got a young man, a teenager on my caseload who was coming from Iraq, and he was explaining to us that he did speak Arabic, but he also spoke this indigenous language, Assyrian. And for him, my work with him was my introduction to the Assyrian culture, and I'm really grateful that I had met him those 4 years and worked with him those 4 years before our adoption, because I would have been completely clueless, honestly.
So you worked for 4 years with a 12-year-old Assyrian boy, a refugee from Iraq,
He was
unaccompanied child.
he was an unaccompanied minor. Yeah, he wasn't 12, but he was from Iraq. Um, yeah, along with children from many other countries as well.
Just curiosity, was he
Yeah.
ever put in a home? Was he ever adopted? Do you
The
know?
unaccompanied refugee minors aren't usually adopted, but they are placed in homes, and these homes are meant to be as close to an adoptive family as possible. It's really hard legally to adopt a youth who doesn't have parents who can sign off on the adoption. That's what makes the adoption of unaccompanied refugee minors so difficult. Not impossible, but more difficult. But the goal is for these foster families, these homes that they're placed in, to become their family for the future. We had wonderful foster families who now are have grandchildren through their adopted, you know, youth that have lived with them for a decade and have grown up to be adults and have children of their own. And those stories are really beautiful to see.
They absolutely are. But this
Yeah.
particular boy, do you have
Hmm.
any idea if he was put placed in a home and whether the home was an Assyrian? Did you ever follow up with him or on his case? Just curiosity.
Yes, actually, he and I have remained friends over the years. He is well established in the Assyrian community. Um, he has friends and extended family in the area. And yeah, he's married now and he's very well settled here in the US.
Excellent. That's a
Yeah.
happy story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes. Yes.
Now let's go back to Victor. How did you come across Victor? What happened? Just take us to the day when you heard there was a little boy available for you and your husband, Jeff, to adopt.
Yes. Yes. Well, we had been a waiting family. That's once you're approved to adopt a child, you're put on a waiting family list. So we had been waiting for about almost a year. Um, while we were waiting, expectant mothers, expectant fathers had looked at our online profiles. They had read our home study reports. They had looked at these type of profile books that adoptive parents make that kind of tell our story. And for 12 months, we had been waiting. Um, One day, our social worker came to our house to update our home study report. And she told us that that day, a birth mom had come to the agency and was very interested in our profile. Her baby had actually already been born. And our social worker started to tell us more of her story. As I'm listening to this story, the thing that was so interesting to me personally is that I got this very calm feeling in my heart. Because a few weeks prior, I had actually been really discouraged about how long we'd been waiting. And I'd been praying about it. And I was saying to God, you know, I have worked and cared for refugees and immigrants several years now. These families are so important to me. Do you think, God, there's an immigrant mom out there who might need a family like ours who can help her in this situation, who might need a home for her baby? And so as the social worker is telling us this story of an immigrant mom who has a baby and she really needs a home for him, and she's chosen us, like immediately it clicked for me. Like, this is it. This is it. This is him. Um, our social worker left after that meeting. We were just sitting there kind of silently listening. We knew we needed to talk about it, my husband and I. She said, I'm going to go. I'm going to go for the evening. You think about it and you text me and we'll talk about it in the morning. As soon as she left, I looked at my husband. He looked at me. We're like, yes, yes. Okay. We didn't even
You
need to
didn't
think
need
about it.
time to think.
No, no. We both said yes, absolutely. And we just texted our worker right away that single word, yes. Um, so she texted back right away. She said, how about we all meet tomorrow? We have a meeting, we see how things go. And if it goes well, could you be ready to bring him home tomorrow? And that's when we went a little bit crazy. I was, I had just left work, come home for the meeting with the social worker that evening, 6 o'clock. And suddenly we were going to be having a baby possibly the next day. So we were running to the store, grabbing supplies and formula and boiling bottles and calling our parents. And we tried to go out for dinner like this is our last date before we have a child suddenly. Our heads were just spinning. But the next morning, we went to the agency. Our social worker was there. Our son's birth mother and her social worker were there. And us adults just met for a while to get to know each other, to ask as many questions as we could in such a short time. And then when she was ready, she brought him into the room to meet us. And she was the one who put him into my arms that day. She was the one who made me a mom.
What was going through your mind as you held your potential new son
Yes.
about the what ifs? What if the
Yeah.
mom changes her mind? Because there are some legal aspects of adopting a child.
Right.
It doesn't happen immediately. Of course, every state has its own laws. And you're holding a son that may or may not be yours. What was
Yeah.
going through your mind and your husband's mind?
Well, actually, we were super excited, of course, like this is our chance to become parents. And at the same time, we were also very nervous. During those 12 months of waiting, we had actually met with two other expectant moms. The first time we'd been waiting for 7 months, we had a meeting with an expectant mother. It went really well. Like we connected in so many ways. But the more we got to know each other, the more some information came out that we felt was like a very big risk for us in adoption. So as much as it broke our hearts to say no, we said no to that match. And then when we'd been waiting 11 months, we had another meeting scheduled. We were getting ready to go to the meeting, and the expectant mother went into labor. She went to the hospital, and the plan was for us to all meet at the hospital the next day. And that evening, after she gave birth, some extended family, maybe an aunt or a cousin or somebody came to the hospital to be with her, and they said, you don't have to do adoption. I'll be here to help you raise this baby. And what a wonderful gift for her to be able to raise her son. But again, that was very devastating for us. So we knew this day that our son was placed in our arms. We knew there was a risk. In the state of Michigan, it can be up to a month before birth parents will go to court and release their parental rights. So it takes time. So we knew we were very excited and very frightened all at the same time, just like a big mix of feelings.
As you're telling me the story of your 18-month adoption process, to me, it sounds like a suspense movie. The ups and
Yeah.
downs and the happiness and disappointments and but with a happy ending. So,
Yes.
did at any time between the time that you saw the mother and you actually had Victor, did you have any indications that the mother may change her mind?
Not really. Like when we looked at the evidence that we had, she was totally in it during our meeting. She had a lot of support in the process of choosing a family for Victor. We still had that nervousness, but when we thought about it clearly, like we had all evidence to show that she was really choosing us for a reason.
I'm going to ask you a question, but you don't have to answer because I know you have some restrictions on what you
Yeah.
can divulge or not.
Yeah.
But may I ask if baby Victor is a full-blooded Assyrian?
Yes, to our knowledge, he is. He is completely 100% Assyrian.
Very well. So now you're going to court. on
Yes,
the big day.
the big day, adoption day.
Tell us what happened.
This was about 5 months after placement. Adoptive families have to be supervised for a period of time to make sure that we ourselves are good parents as best as we can be. And so 5 months into that, we went to court. Um, our families, both of our families came, friends. It was a very big day. We filled the stage at the end when they invited us all up to the front to take a picture. Um, our social worker came with us, and Victor himself just could not stop babbling the whole time. It was as if he were testifying to the judge himself, talking away. Um, but the court hearing itself actually went very quickly, 8 minutes long. The judge pronounced us parents forever, a forever family. She herself was adopted, and so she loved doing these adoptive court hearings. And
The
it was
judge
final.
was. The judge was
Yes,
an adopted.
yes, that's right. Afterward, we invited everyone out to a Middle Eastern restaurant. We wanted them all to taste some of the foods that I was beginning to learn how to cook, and just kind of introduce them to a little bit of who Victor was.
Now, I thought that the Michigan law says that a mother has about 30 days to decide whether she's going to sign the papers over to the new
Right about a
parents or
month.
not.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes. Yes, right about 1 month. Yeah.
1 month. So,
Mhm.
how old was Victor when you first held him and take him home with you?
He was actually 1 month old at
Okay.
that point. Yeah.
So you had until he was 2 months old to find out if the mother is really going to sign the papers over to you, right?
Right, right.
Okay. So that for 1 month period, when you had Victor at home, not
Hmm.
knowing whether he was going to be your child or not, did you withhold bonding with him because you were afraid of too much bonding and then giving him up?
I think that I would say it took us a little bit of time to warm up to each other. I think from both sides. Um, I wouldn't have recognized that I was like guarding my heart until the day that she signed those papers. And then suddenly I felt this, like my heart break open, this freedom, this giving myself permission that it was real. Um, like I said, I wouldn't have recognized beforehand how guarded I was being until that moment. And then I felt just freedom to let it all out. And I think I would say the same for him as well. I mean, as a small baby, if you can imagine, he fell asleep that day at the agency. When he woke up a few hours later, he was in a brand new home with total strangers. We smelled different. We looked different. Were speaking a language that he had actually heard very little of. And so for him, I remember that first day, he himself as a baby just seemed so sad and frightened. And I think all three of us just needed those early weeks and months to really, really gel as a family. Bonding happens, even if it's not at the very first moment. We do become attached to those beings that we take care of, and they become attached to us.
When a mother is pregnant, she has
Right.
9 months to bond with her baby. She
Yes.
knows it's hers, it's inside her, growing. She sees him or her
Mhm.
on sonogram, and just the bonding happens.
Yes.
With an adoption,
Hmm.
did you ever think, how well am I going to bond to this baby? Whether
Right.
I'm going to love this baby fully as though I gave birth to him.
Early on when we were going through the adoption process, I definitely asked myself that question. How well will I bond with a child who is not born from my body, right? And then pretty quickly afterwards, I realized that for me, that question is kind of ridiculous. I am the kind of teacher who cries when my students leave my classroom and go to another one. I dearly love my students. And I have two goddaughters that before I was a parent, I didn't understand. Like the love that I had for those two girls was something I didn't know was possible. Like when I would see them, I'd feel this ache in my heart, seeing how much they had grown, how proud I am of who they had become. And I realized pretty quickly that I didn't need to worry that much about whether I was going to adopt, whether I was going to bond with our adopted child. For me, bonding with children just comes kind of naturally.
I guess you do have, you are endowed with strong motherly instincts.
Yes, I would say that.
Very
Yeah.
good. Lucky for Victor. Charissa, at this time, hold that thought. And
Okay.
we are going to a break to connect with our sponsors of this program. We'll be right back.
All right.
إيمان وايلة أكسيدنت اتنرابة ناشة ليعطي متبصل طاقة شكلي. اتلا نسيانة بدنا كيسس ات injury law. و بيالباية خريمخ. إن آتن ينكل بتت بيتا خزموخن يطانة اتلوخن بوقارة مخبرون المنيان التلفون 8 أوروبا شوا وچو 8 تري وچو 5 خا اشتا يعني توكن بيت injuryrights.com شمي إلى توني كالغراكس كيام زمن لشان خلية يما.
OpenVPN, connecting your world securely. We believe all people should have unfiltered access to the internet. This will strengthen our society and provide people with equal opportunities. Our mission is to connect your world securely by providing a more safe and secure online experience. OpenVPN is the provider of next-gen secure and scalable communication services. Our award-winning open-source VPN protocol is the de facto standard in the open-source networking space with over 50 million downloads. Visit www.openvpn.net to use our consumer VPN private tunnel or our business VPN solution, Access Server.
Welcome back. We are speaking with Mrs. Charissa Boyd, who has adopted an Assyrian little boy, Victor. Charissa, how old is Victor now?
Victor is 5.
You've had him for some time then.
Yes.
Have you decided to tell Victor that he is adopted?
Oh, yes. We've told him from the very beginning. We made this little storybooks. We've always talked with him about his birth parents, who he is, where he comes from. As much as we know, we want him to know too.
That is so wonderful that in the West, a great majority of parents tell their adopted children that they are adopted. So they settle it when the child is young and they get the story out of the way and the child grows up knowing he's adopted or she's adopted, and it's not going to be an issue. In the Middle East, it used to be the opposite. I've left the Middle East some decades ago, but it was that you hid the adoption of your child, and the child would grow up thinking you're his natural parents. And then if he found out later on, it would be a really big blow and a shock and not a very pleasant experience. So I'm glad that you told Victor he is adopted. I don't know how much he understands this unless he visits his natural parents. Can you tell us if he does or not?
Right now we have a semi-open adoption, which means a lot of our communication goes through the agency. but we have seen each other um, in the process also.
That's very good. Charissa, what has boggled my mind about your adoption story is that you have decided to raise Victor as though you and your husband Jeff were Assyrian. You have gone through lengths to make sure Victor knows about his heritage and that he's growing up as an Assyrian man. Tell me why.
Well, what we learned in the adoption process, being the agency gave so many trainings specifically about transracial adoption and what kids really need if they're growing up in a family who is from a different race or a different culture from themselves. And some of the big things that kids really need to know are there other people around me, maybe not in my house, but in my community, who look like me and understand where I come from? Am I hearing the language? I might not ever be fluent in the language, but am I growing up hearing the language of my birth parents in some way? Language, foods, stories, music, all the things that make up a culture. As much as a child can be raised with, it's really so much better for them. It really is.
What do the psychologists say about raising a child? Maybe racial, it would be obvious that the child is
Right.
of a different race, but of a different culture. How do the psychologists, what do they tell you that how it would affect a child being raised with his original culture and being immersed is in his own culture as much as possible?
It only does good. It really does. For the kids who lose their language and culture, they'll feel that deep loss their entire lives. They'll feel out of place when they do eventually. Many of them go searching for people from their culture eventually as adults, and they'll feel this kind of disconnect, like I belong, but I don't really belong. And I think no matter what, as adoptive kids, they'll grow up with some of that. But as much as we can lessen that, the better for them.
I'm assuming there has been a good amount of research gone into
Yes.
this for psychologists to decide this is a better way to go.
Yes, significant.
And you have an interesting story about how you allowed your family and Jeff's family to meet Victor for the first time, and you threw a party. Tell me about that.
Well, we've done a couple of parties now. When we had this dedication of him, like a religious dedication, when he was just a baby. As part of that service, we invited our families. They all wrote letters to Victor explaining how much they loved him. But as part of that, we also shared with him, the family, some of the foods that Victor would have been raised with. We had a special meal with some Middle Eastern food. And also as that event, we asked them to bring gifts, like for a baby, not for Victor, but for other Iraqi babies that we could pass along through an agency to be sent to places like Iraq or places where families needed clothes for their babies, like they were in the middle of a war or things like that. when Victor was a few years older enough to really start understanding he is Assyrian, we created this really large meal for the extended family. I mean, a full 3 to 4 course meal, as much food as I could learn how to cook. I also wrote up a reading that I wanted them all to read together. We read it as a family, who the Assyrians are, the history historically, and who modern day Assyrians are, and what is involved in the culture. Even the little cousins, like we made these little coloring pages of an Assyrian girl with her traditional clothing on, and the kids would color that as we talked. I just wanted all the family, his cousins, his aunts, his uncles, both sets of grandparents, to really know more about who he is.
You had a dinner seminar
Yes, exactly.
with history lessons, and I just saw in the photo that we showed before that you even made up a menu for your
Yes.
extended family with
Yes, we
the
made the menu.
Assyrian winged bull. I mean,
Yes,
you went through a
exactly.
lot of detail and a lot of work to have an Assyrian night. I am so touched by you, Charissa.
Thank you. It's a
Do you
gift.
like Assyrian food?
I do. I do.
What's your favorite?
Oh my. So far, the one that we've cooked the most, well, okay, we do a lot of lentils, but besides the lentils, we do the biryani, the rice, and we do enjoy that. Um, I've I've been a faithful follower of Hilda's kitchen blog. I've learned so much from her, even how to make the Assyrian Easter eggs with the onion skins and the leaves. Yes, um, her blog has been a lifesaver for me, teaching me
Is
how
she
to.
out of Michigan?
I think she's out in California now.
I see.
Yeah.
I've known about her kitchen. I just didn't know where her videos came from. She may be in California. How easy is it to cook Assyrian food?
Not too bad. I love cooking. I cook food from all over the world, so I just love adding new recipes to my repertoire.
And you're fortunate in that Michigan has a large population of Assyrians, Chaldeans, so you
Good.
can get all the spices and ingredients
Mhm.
nearby,
Exactly.
right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Very good. What kind of a child is Victor? If you were to describe his temperaments and who he is, what would you say about him?
Oh my. He is very curious. He wants to know everything. He's also very extroverted. Like from the time he was very young, just maybe 5 or 6 months old, he would try to greet people as they walk by. And he's always very generous. Like he has this hospitable nature. He's always trying to invite people to our house
That's
for
Assyrian.
meals.
That's
Yes,
an
yes,
Assyrian quality.
yes. He has it like deep inside himself. He's very hospitable and generous, like sharing. Um, he's also very much a leader. Like he will take charge of a room in 2 or 3 minutes, and even the kids who are older than him will listen to him. He's a strong little boy.
Does he go to school?
He goes to
Well,
school with me right
these
now.
days there is no school
Yeah.
in some states, but
Yes.
is he at school?
He goes to school. He's in homeschool with me. We're doing homeschool kindergarten this year, and he's learning very quickly.
Is there any way you can have someone teach him reading and writing in Assyrian?
You know, I know there is a group like an Assyrian bilingual preschool online. Once these restrictions from COVID are lifted, before all of this, we had actually found a couple of Assyrian families in our town. It took us some hunting. We even found an Assyrian dentist. And Victor really seemed to connect with this this older gentleman, like a grandfather age. And he also really enjoyed Victor. So we hope once we get more freedom back again, we can get together, gather together more, and Victor could learn more.
Now, if I were to tell you about our own experience, the Assyrian families, the kids who are born in the West, they learn the Assyrian language if spoken to when they're children, and then as they grow up, they resist speaking it. I'm just forewarning you. That could happen to Victor
Yes.
too. English is much easier and much more common in the environment they are in, and so they resist speaking Assyrian. Just beware of that.
Yes.
I am so happy I spoke with you, Charissa. I think our viewers will join me in congratulating us for having an American mother who is raising her little boy like an Assyrian. This is truly heartwarming. And we do appreciate you and Jeff. It's not easy to get into a faraway culture, especially in Assyrian culture, is not like the Italian, the Irish, the German, that's, everywhere, easy to learn. It's an old and very unique culture. Nevertheless, you have made every attempt to raise your little boy, an Assyrian boy, and I'm sure he will grow up to be a happy boy for having parents like you. Congratulations to us. Thank you.
I hope someday he'll be very proud of who he is and where he's come from.
And we're all proud of you. And I've noticed as I'm speaking with you that when you speak about Victor, there's a spark in your eye and you just light up. And you're a great mother. I haven't met Jeff yet, but I'm sure if he's married a woman like you, he is like you.
Thank you.
Best wishes to you, my dear. We would love to speak with you down the line and keep up with Victor, and perhaps have a few words with him too.
Yes.
And thank you so much for your time. I know it's late. You're a mother who has to get up in the morning and teach Victor some lessons. And thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
قشخانا مغبة من مجد دويتت خادويتلا قد خانق وأمريكيته بشتبريته جدا أطرا خاخ قديم بيايلا قليشانن كالتشرن وبرونو بيايلا أرخاين أويا جرفس مخادنا أطورايا هرجرد Charissa Boyd متخرة اتنخا agency بشمت unaccompanied refugee minors. لمبدايا هلام اتلون يال سوراي إن رابس بايب دويا إن أخنان إن بياي خيال سورة شقلق شنو خجبوش جوري أزغل دي agency وبردقخلي خيال سورة آتورايا هرجرت Charissa Boyd و بارزوغيو Jeff Boyd يال سورو بروني جروسونا مخا آتورايا اتلي هيوي اخنن آتورايا يال سورن جرو سخلون مغ آتورايا و کالچرن و لیشانن گاوه خل نخله بسی به رابا من دانوخون رمشوخم شنم
إيمان وايلة أكسيدنت اتنرابا ناشا ليطي متبصلتا قد شكلي اتلا نسيانة بدنا كيسس ات انجري law و بيالباية قريمخ إن آتن ينكل بتت بيتا خزموخن يطانة اتلوخن بوقارة مخبرون المنيان التلفون 8 أربع شوا وچا 8 تري وچا 5 خا اشتا يعني توكن بيت injuryrights.com. شمي إلى توني كالغراكس كي يمزمن لشان خلية يما.
OpenVPN, connecting your world securely. We believe all people should have unfiltered access to the internet. This will strengthen our society and provide people with equal opportunities. Our mission is to connect your world securely by providing a more safe and secure online experience. OpenVPN is the provider of next-gen secure and scalable communication services. Our award-winning open-source VPN protocol is the de facto standard in the open-source networking space with over 50 million downloads. Visit www.openvpn.net to use our consumer VPN private tunnel or our business VPN solution, Access Server.